Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Nick from House of Paint 203, bringing you part 2 of the Bulette series. In part 1, we base coated him for the most part, all but his clear base, which we'll get to in part 3. In this part, we're going to be applying some midtones to the main figure, so we're going to jump right in there with that. In part 1, I used a combination of heavy blue-gray and heavy gray on the shark kind of flesh here, and in this part I'm going to be using a pure heavy blue gray. And what I want to do is start bringing out these ridges. So I'm going to be following these ridge lines that are present on the Bullette's face. Paint is pretty thin, pretty diluted to allow for pretty smooth application. Kind of making like a little arrowhead on his nose here. Following this ridge line up the side of his face. Get the top of that eye ridge. Now I want to see how kind of streaks coming down. We'll look on this guy, kind of making my own application here. Continuing to go back to that center ridge on the side of his head. Making sure my paint is thin. The top edge right there. Catch the edge up there as well. Especially on these plates in particular with the really defined ridges. The rise of those ridges. So kind of get those the edges as well. Some stippling going up in there. Similar here, I really wanted to find this edge. And then maybe give him some definition going up the scale. Following the curve of that scale that way. Each individual scale here is a little different, so which is pretty cool. Up here on his shoulders, I'm going to take some of this heavy blue gray and really get some off my brush. And I am going to try and overbrush on his plates, on his shoulder plates up here. Hoping to catch some good detail there, like that. Go back up to his head. Now we will move on to the belly. So for the belly, I'm just going to be using a straight up khaki. And I'm going to just kind of be following the curve of the plates there. So just double checking to see how much of this figure is actually going to be popping out of the, so he's going to be popping out like this. So going to give some detail to the midsection, but I'm pretty much just going to negate the section down here. I might go in with like a heavy gray just to, you know, give it a finished look, but I'm like overly concerned about it. Again, I'm trying to focus on the edges of his mouth here. There is a little ridge line over here that I'm just kind of following with my brush on the khaki. So that is one layer of khaki under his little underbelly there. I think for a final highlight, I'm gonna just kind of mix the khaki with a little bit of white, or I might even go with some hot yolk brown, but we'll see. I just want to establish some edges along the side of his body. going back to these edges up here too. All right, let's move on from the khaki and go into his flesh. For his flesh, I really want to see what a dry brush looks like of heavy brown. The texture really lends itself to having an effective dry brush, so I'm gonna just see what I can do here. And it is subtle enough that it actually looks pretty good. I'm doing this before I do the claws because if I do this to the claws, with the claws done, then I'm gonna get this dry brush all over the claws because I'm not careful for the most part. Even though I try to be. I mean, I'm even pushing it, doing it with the scales being mid-toned, but I do have very, very little paint on my brush. I actually have to reapply. Purposely using an overbrush here because if you, I don't know if you saw, but I had gotten some of the heavy blue-gray on the leg here, so that was the first place I started because that was the place that I would have the most paint on my brush. His features are going to be covered with a mud effect, but for the most part this is a pretty sweet looking dry brush. I'm not going for anything too extravagant here. So I think that's pretty good. And now I can go into his claws and I think I'm gonna go into his mouth as well. Around the claws, I'm just using a base coat of heavy gray to start. All right. Here he is so far. All right, let's get in on the mouth with a little rosy shadow. Try again with the max highlight. Bring out his claws. This time I'm gonna be using a dry brush of heavy blue-gray here. I'm gonna be using a mud effect on him, so like I said, not a whole lot of this is gonna be seen, so the heavy blue-gray is actually looking pretty good as a dry brush on the claws here. Nice and easy. Nice and easy. And that, I think, is a good place to stop for part 2. In part 3, we're going to finish the body of the model with some max highlights, and then we are going to be working on his base. And then we're going to be trying out a wet mud effect on certain parts of his body. So still have a few things left to do. Again, this is a smaller model. So taking a little break from the statues that I've been working on, like the Goristro and everything else. I had to like ice my elbow after the Goristro, but so looking forward to finishing this guy up. Again, like I said, one of my favorite monsters. As always, I thank you for joining me. Information on how to follow me on all my social media platforms is immediately following the video, as is information on how to follow Dominic Marriott of Credit UK, good friend of the show. And also, good friend of the show, a recent friend of the show, Mike Donnarummo, who is providing some original music specifically for the show. So shout out to Dominic, shout out to Mike, and shout out to all of you who continue to support, ask questions, throw out feedback. I really do appreciate it. And again, up to 70 subscribers right now. So guys, I'm very grateful for you going on this journey with me, and I will see you all for the next one.